Thank you very much for coming in. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Okay, Brian, for MenzShed, please.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to talk this morning. Although I'm from Hornby MenzShed, we have been the lead organisation in one of the submissions for the use of 151, 153 Gilberthorpe Road, and we've put a proposal to Council on behalf of the MenzShed, Tongan Youth Trust, Fiji Social Services and Greater Hornby Residents Association to jointly use the site. The intention is that we would actually form a trust from those organisations and potentially other organisations such as the Filipino Church, who you'll hear from shortly, to run that site. The site was originally bought by the council under the Public Works Act for community purposes. Now those community purposes have not gone away, as Mike has talked about and as Kerry has talked about. The community is actually bigger, and the way Kāingaroa are throwing up multi-dwelling units, it's going to get a lot bigger yet. The community still has high levels of social deprivation, and it's a very ethnically diverse community, and I suspect getting more ethnically diverse. The long-term plan of the council scheduled the site for disposal. That was based on the assumption that there was no community need for it. Yes, the current community user group had moved out, but that assumption was wrong, as shown by the fact that we've got the groups now working very hard to retain that site, and we have a need for it. Our proposal to the council was actually for the council to sell. We didn't want to take the whole thing, we weren't too greedy, was to sell 153, which is on a separate title, and use part of the proceeds they would get from that sale to cover the demolition of the old barracks block, putting up some fences and related subdivision costs. It would still leave the council with some money. 151 would be retained for the community purposes. The staff report shows a discounted cash flow based on our option of a net present value of minus $478,000. That's effectively saying that there's an opportunity cost for the council of not selling 151 and us retaining it. We'll skip that slide. Risk to the council is a big concern, but I've got to say, what are you really afraid of? The worst case scenario is you let us take it over, we spend 5 years trying to make the money to do the upgrades, and we don't get it. You take the site back from us. Yes, maybe the building has deteriorated in the 5 years because we haven't been able to do anything to it. So what? You're going to boll it anyway or sell it as is for demolition. So the worst loss for the council is you've put off 5 years of being able to sell it. But that's not going to happen. Within the MenzShed, we have several members who've been involved in running capital projects in the multi-million-dollar range. We have an experienced property manager. We also have several tradespeople just within the MenzShed. Peter Hay will talk shortly about the Filipino Church and the huge resources they have in terms of trade staff who are able to do work. So we are going to be reliant to a large extent on grant funding, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but we are going to be able to do a large part of the work ourselves at considerably reduced costs. Yes, we will be dependent on grant funding. We have already met with Rata and Lotteries, who are two of the biggest funders around. At this stage, they're not in a position to make any commitment to us for funding, but they've both said that the idea of a cooperation between different groups is the kind of thing they're very keen on. Not just one group working on a site, but a number of groups working together. They're very keen on that. They're also very enthusiastic about the fact that we're going to be working with young people, particularly through the likes of Tongan Youth Trust and Fiji Social Services, have a strong emphasis on young people. And the MenzShed at the other end of the spectrum, very strong emphasis on older people. And those are groups that those funders are very keen to support. Timeframe and costs are a bit of an issue. The council staff are concerned that it would take quite some time before we were able to use the site. We have a few issues around that, and we have had some discussions with that about things like, do we need resource consent before we can actually start using the site? Our understanding is that it's currently zoned, I think, suburban residential, that under that there is limited use for places of assembly and places of worship, with some restrictions on ours. That would mean that the likes of the Filipino Church, Tongan Youth Trust, Fiji Social Services could begin operations pretty well straight away without a resource consent. MenzShed running a workshop, a little bit of an issue, and certainly longer term, in fact, not even long term, but in a slightly longer time frame, we would be looking to get a resource consent, and we'd almost certainly need that to run the workshop. There's also some concern about how much upgrade work do we need to do before we can actually use the building. We're not worried about the barracks block, that's gone. We're just worried about the hall and building other buildings on the site. But to take over the hall, yeah, we accept that the toilets probably need a complete rebuild. And again, Peter will talk about the Filipino Church and their ability to do that. But things like double glazing and insulation, yeah, great long-term things, but do we need to do those before we move in? Because at the moment, council staff are saying that we do, but yeah, we've got some questions about that. Okay.
How we going, mate?
I think we're actually out of time.
I think we are. Yeah. Have you got long to go?
About 30 seconds, if that.
Good, great.
Okay.
Great.
The council staff report included a map that showed 30 facilities roughly in a 2 kilometre zone of the site. Not really all that helpful. We've been looking for 3 years to find somewhere that's suitable for us. Now, the map shows quite a number of facilities, and there's plenty of halls that could be hired if you just want a hall. We don't want a hall. MenzShed want a workshop. Noisy machinery, yeah. And Tongan Youth Trust, Fiji Social Services, potentially Te Whare Awhero, they're looking for office space, not just a meeting hall. So, yeah, alternatives are not really there. Okay, thanks very much for your time.
Could I kindly request, Mr. Mayor, for a little bit of extra time for questions?
We've already had lots, but carry on.
Yeah, because they're going to be involved in mostly our colleagues' amendment potentially, but also option 2. Be cool to just ask them face to face, if that's all right. But I was actually wanting to talk about the benefits of the MenzShed and also the multiple community groups. But not only is there a social return on investment, there's actually a financial one, particularly the MenzShed setting up picnic tables, benches that can save council quite a lot of money too. Would you be able to elaborate a bit more on that?
Okay, just to clarify, MenzShed exists primarily for the benefit of the men. Basically, I think I might have put it in my original report that it's grumpy old men getting together and working on projects, and by doing that they become a little bit less grumpy. But having said that, we do community work. Part of our focus is doing projects for the community. At the moment, we're doing a couple of things. We're working with Te Whare Awhero, and we're building garden planter boxes for their garden projects to get people growing veggies. They're also sponsoring us to run a woodwork program once a week in Gilberthorpe Primary School. They've asked us if we could do the same thing at Hornby School, but we don't have the resources at the moment because we're just it'll be a lot easier to get more people involved if we have a base to work from.
Thank you.
We've also looked at doing picnic tables for Templeton School, in discussion with them at the moment. So we are interested in doing those other kinds of projects, as you say, picnic tables, that kind of thing around the place, certainly. Yep.
Thank you, Brian. They're good answers. So thank you very much for coming and doing your presentation. Brilliant. Okay, so